Welcome, dear students, to the massive open online course on Political Economy 2. In today's module, we are going to learn about the concept of modern corporation. The objective of this module are to give a brief overview of the birth of modern corporation. We would like to elucidate in clear terms the process by which the modern corporation has evolved using various theories. And then we would proceed to understand the exact notion of what modern corporation is all about, and we would also like to explain the characteristics of the behavior of modern corporation. Now, the business of modern corporation, or limited liability as it was called in England, was largely an invention of the 19th century. To understand what made the 19th century corporation distinctive, we must first examine three key components. They are legal personality, limited liability, and the joint stock principle. Now, let us try to explain each of them one by one. An institution will be having a legal personality if it meets the following conditions. A. Existence independent of its members, that is, it survives even after death, capable of entering into contracts, suing and being sued as a legal entity, including liability for crimes, and C. able to own property in one's own name. Secondly, the principle of limited liability protects the individual members of a company from personal liability for the debts of the company beyond the capital invested, or in general beyond a certain amount. In modern law, it would essentially mean that it is trying to protect the board members and the corporate staff from tort liability as well. And lastly, when we talk about the joint stock principle, it is a basis upon which risks and investments are pooled. In the early modern period, the East India Company from England and the Dutch East India Company, they were both examples of joint stock companies. And unlike the later corporations, they were considered partnerships in law, thus limiting the protection that is given to the investors. Now, when we talk about modern corporation, what we essentially see is that the real novelty here basically lies in combining all these three entities into a single institution which would be free from any public control. And it was not only in England. Similar changes like this were taking place in Europe and also in the United States during the 19th century with respect to the organization of large-scale business. And this form of corporation that developed in the United States, they became a dominant form in the 20th century. And we can also say that the 19th century industrial policies, they basically treated corporations as government tools, or basically weapons or tools in the hand of the government. In what follows afterwards, what we are going to do in this module is basically we will try to trace the process by which modern corporations have evolved in the context of the laws and customs of the United States of America, and we will try to look at the theories by which this process was panned out. The first one is that of grant theory. Basically, the formation of quasi-public corporations from, say, 1820 to 1850 as a part of a process of building a transportation network, say in the form of rails, canals, and roads. And they basically operated as a quasi-public agency. The second one is called the association theory or the contract theory. That is the rejection of public-private partnership model of corporations and the privatization of control, particularly of infrastructure like railroads from 1850 to 1890. And then we have the natural entity theory, the extension of free incorporation and emergence of the natural entity theory that took place between 1890 to 1905. So students, I would like to ask you a question now. What do we essentially understand by the concept called grant theory? Now, this is basically the stage one of the whole process. Here, basically, the corporation acts as a quasi-public agency. And this was one of the earliest theory that had legitimized the existence of corporations in the United States. And hence, it was called the grant theory. It was based on the idea that a corporation existed for a limited purpose under a charter that has been granted by the state. Canals, bridges, railroads, they were mostly developed in the first half of the 19th century by corporations chartered by the state to build a predominant unit of infrastructure. And it brought together the public and the private investors for projects that were understood to be in public interest. The powers or privileges that the state gave to these quasi-public corporations included the right of monopoly, the limited liability of the shareholders, the possibility of issuing bonds, and even they were granted the right to issue money. Dobbin, in his 1994 paper, has referred to the close cooperation between the state and such private interest as mercantilism. We all know what the term mercantilism means. It basically means a term which was, it was a term which was generally applied during the 18th centuries to policies that were designed to enhance the power of the national governments by mainly trade, that is by promoting exports and also by limiting imports. So this was what mercantilism was all about. But in this case, when we talk about grant theory, here Dobbin did not mean that type of mercantilism that I was talking about. Here he meant the state's role was merely to support specific infrastructure projects which were aimed at providing some sort of transportation to the economy like railroads, roads, etc. Next, we come to stage 2. Stage 2 is called the contract theory. And here basically we would like to focus on the fact that there is a privatization of control that takes place in this stage between the period 1850 to 1885. The privatization process, mind you, was not an inevitable process. Okay. There is nothing, as you can say, natural about corporations who are operating as purely private institutions for the sole benefit of their stockholders. There were certain events that triggered off this stage 2. The most important event that did was the financial panic that was created in USA at that point of time in 1837, and also the subsequent depression which caused a number of companies in the United States to declare themselves as bankrupt. So, as a part of the general contraction that was taking place in the US economy at that point of time, many chartered corporations failed. Many of them who were also engaged in various infrastructure projects like canal building or the development of railroads, they failed. They failed miserably. Projects were left incompleted, half completed. Citizens who had bought bonds to finance these projects lost their money on all these investments. So we find that over the next decade in the United States, the state started issuing fewer and fewer corporate charters. Public sentiments had turned against them. The critics of the mixed corporate charters argued that political institutions are basically inherently incapable of dealing with economic activities. And the idea gained credibility that risky investments should be a purely private sector activity. and this was the turning point of privatization of the term called control. So in effect, what do we notice here? We see here that the public blamed depression on public investment because the failure of large infrastructure projects was highly visible. So we find in the economy, in this way, we find a new orthodoxy was born that regarded privatization as a necessary step towards economic health. Next, we come to step 3, the third final process. We call it the natural entity theory, or something which is called the acquisition of natural personhood. And the time period is from 1885 to 1905. Now, in years after 1890, the modern corporation had reached full maturity. The theory of corporations as natural entities that could acquire natural personhood was widely accepted by scholars and researchers alike. Corporations had gained a full degree of autonomy from the state. They went on to increase their power in relation to the government by evading various types of regulations, by consolidating into holding companies, and also by intervening in politics. And the major difficulty that was facing corporations at the beginning of this period was how to maintain discipline within the cartels. And here we come to the evolution of a new legal device that is called trust. And trust was intended to solve this problem at this stage. So to achieve the centralized control of the firms in a pool, this now required another new legal entity that could own a controlling interest in every participating firm. And this was basically the function of the holding company. So, in the 1890s, holding companies slowly began to replace the legal entity called trusts. But again, this legal form was not uniformly or universally available. Many enterprises were still under or within the ambit of legal partnerships, so that they could not be controlled through simple stock ownership. Now, what is Sherman Act? Sherman Act was entrusted during the period 1890. This has long been viewed as an instrument to protect competition and prevent the concentration of economic power by making trusts illegal. But the net effect was a far greater concentration of market power by the corporations than had happened during the situation when we had trusts. Although corporations and partnerships could no longer engage in pools to restrict competition and maintain a price level, there was no prohibition of corporate cross-ownership. We find here at this stage that consolidation took the form of outright purchase of other businesses. And then we had the merger movements of 1890 to 1893 and 1898 to 1902, and they are commonly interpreted in the business world's reaction to the policy of legal restrictions on pools or trusts. Mergers made possible the consolidation of corporate power. But corporations still remain vulnerable to attack until legal theory accommodated with a further step towards corporate personification. In order for one corporation to own another, each institution needed to be conceived of as a distinctive natural entity, not as a collection of individual owners. So this natural entity theory, according to which a corporation will neither be a legal fiction that has been created by the state, nor would it be a contract amongst the individuals, but we will be looking at corporations as a natural person whose existence was there prior to law. We now come to the concept of what modern corporation is all about. Modern corporation refer to an idealized picture of a certain type of corporation which is taken as broadly representative of the way in which the large corporation is developing. If we try to sketch out the characteristic features of modern corporation, we can say that it is large both in terms of absolute size, such as the total assets, and also in relative terms compared to the size of the major markets that it serves. In this market, if the firm is either dominant or one of a small group which jointly dominates the market, in either event, this firm basically has considerable market power. It is generally complex in structure, operating a multitude of establishments and are widely spread geographically. They sell a variety of products and operates in a large number of industries, often crossing the boundaries of industrial divisions and engaging mainly in primary production, manufacturing, and trade. The major principle on which the modern corporations are founded are basically the concepts of mass production and mass marketing. The modern corporation is growing, and growth is seen to be a permanent feature of its activity. Growth, we all know, basically it is linked to the concept of immortality. Through growth and change, the enterprise endures beyond the decay of particular markets, particular sources of supply, and also particular technology. So growth basically is something that ensures immortality to the concept of corporation. Ownership, we find, is disappearing. Stockholding is widely dispersed. There is no single group of persons in or out of management who has a significant control over the corporate action resting on stock ownership. Dividends are also stabilized in the neighborhood of half average earnings. Stockholders, in effect, becomes holders of perpetual bonds, and with the sublimation of ownership, management has become more professionalized. Managers basically are not owners in this type of modern corporations. Typically, they have been internally recruited. The directors and officers, they become less distinct. The board of directors is simply the committee of the whole of the executive group. So now we would like to focus on what exactly make up the behavior of modern corporation, and we would like to say here that there is a major emphasis on scientific management based on rationality when we are considering the managerial function of modern corporations. Management itself is subject to an intensive division of labor. Previously, what we used to see, there was elements of, in this context of modern corporations, we find at the present moment, there are elements of psychology, sociology, economics, statistics, applied mathematics. All these subjects are increasingly invading the areas of decision making in the context of modern corporations. Previously, it was only business judgment alone, or modestly fortified with a little bit of accounting here and there. And at this present moment, here we find that intuition is slowly giving way to computations. Now, analyzing the character of the behavior of modern corporation, firstly, I would like to say that a great weight has been attached to growth and technical progress as a measure of achievement. Growth itself is important. The successful firm should be growing at least as fast as the growth of its output, total output. So, such a rate of growth represents only conserving your particular given position. As the firm continues to have a constant addition of new activities, the firm will try to aim at much more, so long as there are substantial sectors of the economy which are not dominated by modern corporation. This aim can be achieved. The second most important character is that growth is presented in terms of change. It is not presented in terms of mere expansion of the already existing activities. So here, whenever we talk about growth in the context of modern corporation, it implies change. So it means that substantial amount of investment must have taken place in the context of research and development to create new products, and further substantial investments have also taken place in the context of advertising, promotion, so that once the products have been created after much research and development, these products, a demand in the market for these products can be created in the sense of using brand promotions, advertising, and so on. Coupled with the emphasis on growth is an emphasis on long-range planning and also a corresponding desire for short-run stability. So you see, the characters of modern corporation behavior, they give emphasis on both. They are talking both about how to supply new innovative products, and at the same time, they're also looking at strategies as to how to increase demand for these products. They're not only looking at the short-term aspect of stability, but at the same time, they're also looking at the long-term strategies of planning in the corporations. So all these things together results in the growth of the modern corporation. The third characteristic of the behavior of modern corporation is a wide-ranging scope of responsibility that has been assumed by the management. The management now sees itself as responsible to stockholders, the employees, the customers, the general public, and perhaps the most important, the firm itself as an institution. To the customers, the management owes an improving product, good service, and fair dealing. When customers are themselves firms, not households, the emphasis on fair dealing is specifically strong. To the employees, what do the management owe? The management owes them, to the employees, high wages, pension, insurance system, medical care programs, stable employment, agreeable working conditions, a human personnel policy, and its responsibilities to the general public are widespread. Leadership in local charitable enterprises, concern with factory architecture and landscaping, provision of support for higher education, and even research in pure science. So these are just to name a few about what things can be done. And to the firm itself as an institution, the management owes the primary responsibility of ensuring the maintenance and, if possible, the expansion of its long-run position. In other words, what is essentially required is a sustained and rapid growth for the modern corporation, and its only thing of interest is that it owes to the customers, it owes to its employees, and it owes to the firm itself, and all these parameters are basically having their own distinguishing features. From another viewpoint, we can summarize the behavior of modern corporation in terms of the use it makes of its market power. It would like to ensure the security and the permanence of the institution by aggressive creation and occupation of developing markets and technologies as far as possible. to pass on the benefits to the members of the institution at all levels of the institutional hierarchy, and to pass on benefits also to the general public, chiefly in the shape of new products, and of course using low-cost technologies for making old products more abundant, and also in various other ways. Now, as product becomes established in the market and technologies become familiar, the advantages of the leading producer over others will tend to diminish and competition in the market is going to grow. So what is needed is continued product innovation, which will help to maintain the dominant position of the leading firm. So in one perspective, this is nothing but the Schumpeterian competition, the process of what Schumpeter used to call the process of creative destruction, and this is clearly desirable. But if the same firm or small group of firms continues in leadership, both because of their present power enables them to spend more on product development and promotion than their minor rivals, and their past dominance furnishes a great marketing advantage for them in leading consumer preferences in the direction of their innovations, then the competitive character of the process will not be that much distinct. It will be less clear. The phenomenon of growth and innovation in the context of modern corporation presents another set of problems. Resources are committed to expansion, to development of new products, to changing consumer tastes. Decisions as to how to spend in these ways and how to allocate these expenditures are made inside the firm, relatively insulated from what is going on in the market. So the combination of high proportion of internal financing with inherent bias towards expansion and change leads to exemption of these decisions from what we call the capital market tests of profitability. So this is one limitation that we notice here. So what we essentially learned in this module is this whole evolution of modern corporation. The method of analysis that we have attempted here is generally historical in character. First, we find that the corporations were chartered by the state governments to carry out public benefit activities, mainly in the realm of infrastructure like bridge building, railroad building, etc. And these type of mixed corporations had gradually lost their flavor during the depression of the 1840s and were replaced by private for-profit corporations that continued to use some debt financing instruments which were employed by the state. So here we basically call the privatization of control the second stage. And lastly, in the 1890s, we saw the grant of the status of natural persons and the emergence of modern corporations. And we also learned about the character of their behavior.